Do you welcome that move by the federal government to try to get the premiers to bring more stranded Australians home, or are you worried that our quarantine systems won't be able to cope with the influx?
Well, thanks, Ash. Certainly what we need to do is move from the hard border through to a smart border. It needs to be compassionate, it needs to be transparent, it has to have objective criteria and an appeals process around who's allowed in at particular times. It's not beyond the capability of a nation like ours to, with the number of months that we've had to prepare, to have a really smart and efficient way of compassionately bringing our people back home and doing it in a safe way.
And what about the state borders? Are some state leaders now being overly cautious on that front? Are they lacking compassion, as they've been accused of?
Well, I think that we certainly need to transition on the state borders to a much better understanding of why it is that people are allowed to come and go. And using technology surely should be the way forward here. There are ways, I think, of tracking where people are that people would be quite happy to cooperate with in most instances, so that the sort of quarantining that we need and the safety that we need for the community can be guaranteed, and that those who need testing should be followed up. I don't understand why the states haven't announced more around what they're planning to do, other than the system that's already been in place, which does seem to be a bit of a black box. It's hard to know why some people get permission to move, other people don't. And I think that if we did have a much smarter border with a tech basis to it and with transparency, people would accept it more at both the international and the state level, and we would then be able to allow more people to move around in a safe way without moving the virus around.
You might have just heard then in our headlines that Donald Trump, the US president, has said that a coronavirus vaccine could just be weeks away. Does that surprise you? Does it sound realistic?
Well, nothing that Mr. Trump says surprises me. I think that now that he's acknowledged that he downplayed the virus from the facts that he was told initially, it's very difficult to take anything people like that say too seriously, because he might have some other agenda in what he's saying we don't know. And it's another example as to why it's so important that it's purely factual information that's put forward and without political spin. And I think there's a lesson for that in our own country. The politicians need to stop attacking one another, need to stop trying to score points, and need to sit down and work out effective plans for moving forward. I don't think we'll have a vaccine in a few weeks, although I think we've got every reason to be optimistic that one of the 170 countries that are working hard on vaccines is going to have something for us in the new year. But we have to be sure that it's safe, because it will be a disaster if we roll something out too early and it turns out to be more harm than good.
Have you been surprised at just how polarising the debate over the handling of the pandemic has become? I mean, we've seen that in the US, as you just alluded to here, but here we've just learnt that the CMO in Queensland has been receiving death threats. It seems like the polarising debate has come down to these two camps now. Some saying, look, Sweden was the right way to go. Others saying, lock us down. We're happy to lock down as long as necessary until the vaccine comes around. It has been a really interesting debate to watch.
Look, it is interesting, and it's not surprising that under stress a nation starts to get some sort of fairly frantic voices coming out in one direction or another. And if you've either got a relative who may die from COVID, or you've got a business which could go under because of the restrictions, then clearly you've got a conflict of interest in how this should be managed. And we need to go for, I think in our society we usually go for what's fair. We're prepared to accept what is harsh if we get a fair outcome. And Australians, I think, value looking after people. We certainly look after our sick very well, those who have cancer or the elderly. We want them to be well looked after as a community. So I think it's healthy that we have these kind of conversations as we move forward, but I'm relieved that our politicians have by and large backed the science, which says that not only will you have a better human outcome if you take this disease very seriously, and you will avoid the thousands of deaths, 5,000 and more that we've seen in Sweden, but you will also avoid the worst of the economic onflow from that, which we've also seen a much greater contraction in growth in Sweden than we have in the comparable Scandinavian countries, or indeed Australia, where I think we're learning that smashing community with death and devastation is certainly going to also smash the economy.
Just finally, on looking after our healthcare workers, you probably won't be surprised to see today that the University of Western Australia has released a report showing that a high percentage of healthcare workers are at risk of contracting airborne diseases such as COVID-19 due to PPE face masks not being fitted correctly. Why are we seeing such a lag between the evidence on this and government policy?
Well, I think it's because the infection control experts group took a particular view early on that this could not be an airborne disease. And so the advice that went to the federal government and flowed through to the states was that we don't need the N95 type masks for standard care of COVID. I think that that's wrong. I think that people like Anthony Fauci, who's well respected in the US, and many other scientists are saying until we know for sure how this thing works, and particularly in the light of devastating numbers of healthcare workers getting infected, we have to take a precautionary approach, a more precautionary approach than that was recommended. And there's some restructure going on with these Commonwealth committees, but as with all things government, it's a bit slow and there's a lot of ego involved. And we need to just get past that and say, you've had 3,500 healthcare workers infected in Victoria under the watch of the infection control experts group. That now needs to be significantly remodelled. We need to move to a precautionary footing where we just give people the sort of PPE that doctors and nurses only dream of when they see cleaners wearing it on TV. Our country should be prepared with full N95 masks. It should be prepared on the front line with reusable gear like the sort of astronaut type stuff that you see around the place. And we have no excuse for not having it in place already, Ash.
Dr. Andrew Miller, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you.